Of the Bible is very limited. Preparing this homily gives me a chance to learn from others and to ask more questions. I don't have the answers. Today's gospel reading is a parable. The word parable comes from the Greek to throw alongside of. Related to the parabola arc shape, and that reminds me of the picture of the Dufferin Bridge at the CNE that was on the cover of my high school geometry book. Parables are familiar earthly stories thrown alongside abstract or moral truths to help listeners learn and understand. There's a hidden meaning and a life application. There's an opportunity for interpretation and reflection. A parable has been called an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. It's teaching, not preaching. Stories are easier to remember. We may remember parables later and apply their lessons in new situations. I've done this in my work. Disabled people and family associations had been advocating against segregated schools and classes for years. In 1995, the Ontario government finally announced that regular classroom placement should be considered first for all students deemed to have special education needs. The Ministry of Education provided professional development money and gave some of it to us, the advocates, the outsiders, the radicals, for a project. Schools applied to us and wanted our advice about how to change regarding pedagogy, organization, and attitudes. I was project coordinator of the Building Inclusive Schools project, working with school and community teams in elementary and secondary schools, French and English, in Catholic and public school boards in all 6 regions of the province. We put today's well-known sowing parable to common use, more earthly than theological, as a metaphor related to strategic planning. The project involved planting seeds, and we only had a few seeds, resources, money, people, time. So we wanted to avoid rocks and thorns, to find fertile soil, hoping to reap the biggest benefit. That involves sowing and then waiting. As Wendell Berry wrote, "The seed is in the ground. Now may we rest in hope while darkness does its work." It required patience. You can't pull those tiny seedlings up to see how they're doing. It won't help. We applied fertilizer. Maybe that was encouragement, cheerleading, some hype, some, information shared. Plants need water, and we sometimes added tears. And we hope that repeated cycles of sowing, growth, and harvest would nurture us and promote a harvest of change. Some say Jesus used parables for 2 reasons: to reveal truth to some and to conceal truth from others. More direct messages might have given his opponents an opportunity to persecute him even sooner. Even though this parable mostly focuses on the seeds or the soil, the text says it's about the sower. However, that's a puzzle too, because the sower is only mentioned at the beginning. Even in Jesus' interpretation, he never directly mentions the one sowing the seed, only the seed and the ground it falls on. One analysis I read called the parable's titles aftermarket titles, added later, not divinely inspired. If titles are interpretations that reflect and create bias, perhaps they should be disregarded. So parables can be puzzling. I wonder, should we focus on the seed, the soil, sowing, the harvest, the sower? However, today's gospel reading is one of the few parables that Jesus interprets, not to the crowds, just to his disciples. The same story is told in Mark and Luke, and it's interpreted there too. Wikipedia says Jesus later explains to his disciples that the seed represents the gospel, the sower represents anyone who proclaims it, and the various soils represent people's responses to it. I suppose Jesus wants his disciples to understand that their message will be received unevenly as they go forth. But Jesus' explanation scares me. He talks about the evil one coming, persecution overturning joy, and self-interest choking growth. A parable has been described as a modest story with vast implications, a quiet vessel carrying moral or spiritual truth. It speaks softly, yet its meanings unfold with enduring force, revealing insight through analogy rather than argument. But to me, Jesus' explanation of this story in the later part of the chapter seems loud, more like preaching than teaching, more directive and judgmental. I wonder about the cultural context. After all, some biblical metaphors that were very meaningful for Jesus' original audience might be less obvious to modern readers. Modern farmers maximize efficiency and crop yield by drilling seeds into the soil at precise, uniform depths and intervals, and covering them to protect them from birds and harsh conditions. Today, farmers would never waste seed on paths, rocky ground, or among thorns. This parable describes a farming process that seems inefficient and careless. This haphazard sower scatters seeds anywhere at all, on the hard-packed soil of the paths, in rocky, shallow soil, and among thorns. In the parable, the sower and the seed stay the same, but results vary greatly. The only variable is the soil. Of course, we want to achieve best harvest. Returns 30 or 60 or 100 times greater sound amazing. So we're going to want to find the right soil. And that's what we tried to do metaphorically with the Building Inclusive Schools project. But does this parable say we should be selective about people? Are some less worthy? I shudder to think about blood and soil, Nazi and white supremacist ideology used to justify genocide and invasion. But if we are the soil, how receptive are we? Are there rocks, thorns, and hardness within us? Should we try to improve and become better soil? However, we need to understand that life itself can be rocky and thorny, full of unpredictable, unexplainable, and unknowable outcomes. Some people seem to have easy lives without really trying, or even when they don't seem to deserve it. Suffering can come at random, beyond our control. Reverend Eric Parker, a Lutheran minister from the Canadian prairies, presents another explanation of this parable. He wrote, "The soil is not the point." The sower, he quote here, "The sower seems to be scattering seed, knowing that it probably will not grow, but seeing the possibility that it might. What this parable does show is a God who has decided to scatter grace, mercy, and love in all directions, on the rocky, the shallow, the thorny soil, and the good soil. It is a God who wants the word of the kingdom to be heard everywhere and anywhere. It shows a God who is determined to let us know that we are cherished and loved, imperfections and all. This sowing God is showing us that the sower does not see good and bad soil. The productivity of the soil does not determine whether the sower sows. Whether we are good and holy, whether we are hard, rocky, or thorny, these things do not determine whether God loves. And there is no amount of fruit that we can bear or fail to bear, no good works that we can do to earn, or sins that will separate us from God's love and mercy. End of quote. So maybe this reflects a different analogy about our agriculture. When seed is scattered and the animals eat it, they create fertilizer that enriches the ground. Plants that wither add to soil health. The deeper roots of the thorns help the good developing soil to stay in place as the land is renewed. Birds are not evil. After all, God's tender view includes the sparrows too. They need to eat, and they replant seeds further afield. Seen in this way, throwing seed on bad soil is productive. It renews the land and prepares it better to support future growth. Eric Parker also wrote, quote, "This parable is about a God who is willing to see that there is possibility even in the rocky, hard, shallow, and thorny soil. Even knowing that the seeds may not grow in poor conditions, God scatters and plants anyways, with wild abandon, willing to imagine and see if seeds will grow, even in the unexpected places. The excitement of potential, the willingness to see possibilities, seem so hopeful." End of quote. That is a message of love, care, and inclusion. It offers hope and the potential for change for each of us and for society. The poem in our first reading says, "Seeds are miracles, like prayers, an impossible promise." It says, "I make wishes too. I breathe my brightest, most golden dreams into these seeds for the beautiful future which wants and waits to be born." In summer, seeds are blown and scattered all over. Some produce massive harvests, but plants can grow even in cracks in the pavement. Some even have the power to crack the pavement. We see the cycle of life, death, and rebirth around us, now and forever.
Thank you, Marilyn.